Hello, everybody. This is Peter. Welcome to the October 5th radio show. There was a little bit of a glitch getting on the air here, so please bear with me. Hopefully I'm not too late, though. I'm getting different time locks here, depending on where it's streaming. But nevertheless, we have an interesting show for you all today. We're going to be talking with Dennis Traynor, Jr. from the October 6th Coalition to Occupy Freedom Plaza in Washington, D.C. And we're also going to be talking with Brian Phillips of Occupy Wall Street. I don't need to inform everybody about what's been happening. Well, obviously across the world, which started many months ago with different levels of civil unrest against the banking financial system, of course, government correlations. But it's spread now to America with a unique lack of media attention, which I'm sure many of you have recognized as well, with lots of pundits and newscasters and political officials shunning this occupation, as it were, that seems to be spreading almost exponentially through the United States and, of course, the world as well. Occupy Wall Street's where it began a couple of weeks back, and I think this is particularly fascinating. And it's something that the Zeitgeist Movement needs to be very privy of and pay attention to and, in fact, become a part of, at least if you feel that it's in your interest, in your courage to do so. Essentially, what it comes down to is we need to get our message out there so the public can, so the protesters can have a larger sense of what can actually be done as far as change. The issue at hand really is about, I hate to say the word ignorance, but I've been watching a lot of the reactions and a lot of the demands, and I am going to be talking with the individuals I mentioned later in the broadcast about these issues. And what we have is a very vast set of objections that really can be narrowed down into a very simple logic, in fact, a very simple logic that goes down to the heart of what this social system is, what the market system is, what the financial system embraces, how that relates to the decision-making processes of the political institutions. For those that follow the Zeitgeist Movement, none of this should be new to you. This is pretty common stuff that we've been talking about for a long, long time. So it's critically important that we basically come into this and work to educate and work to spread the message as we have. I do believe that the momentum that's been sparked here, given how fast it's gained attention, regardless of the lack of media exposure in the West, it's not going to stop, and it's going to get bigger and bigger and likely more chaotic and more, turbulent. I'm one side of me is excited by the prospect that I'm seeing because it's kind of the way I sort of envisioned this type of uprising to occur anyway. But another side of me is fearful. Another side of me says, well, if a mass rebellion does occur in the States and the West, we basically could set ourselves up for even more totalitarian reactions from the state. We could set ourselves up into a spiral that could lead into certain levels of oppression, certain levels of dictatorial measures coming from Washington. If there isn't the proper request of demand that's logical and rational and clean, with a very, very unified movement to seek those demands and resolution, it could backfire. It doesn't mean that it backfires, everything goes back to the way it was. My point is it could end up someplace way beyond anything anybody ever intended, especially when the panic mode hits. What I see is a beautiful, poetic world of shift happening right now where people are willing to stand up in a very, very nonviolent way. Granted, I suspect agents of provocateur are right around the corner, so when you see people in downtown Wall Street throwing bricks through windows, be first to suspect that they are not actually with the group. But this is where the Zeitgeist Movement comes in as far as education. So what I'm going to do, I'm going down to New York, Wall Street fairly soon and to motivate those in the New York chapter. And I'm going to more or less kind of approach this as a day that we all go to our local facilities, our local centers that are engaging this in your local community. Sort of the Zeitgeist descends upon occupation of Wall Street, occupation of the financial center, Occupy Everything. It's sort of really a global issue, as we all know very well. So I'm going to be talking about that more so, and we'll be posting what my agenda is, and I hope we can really engage this. That's my biggest concern, is engagement. not yelling at the buildings and yelling at Wall Street and yelling at this and that and the suits and screaming about all the imbalance until we get down there and address the protesters and educate the protesters. I know that might sound arrogant, but it happens to be true. And I don't mean to demean anybody that's actively engaging in this process, but what have we been talking about for the past 2.5 years? What has been our central focus? And if those points that we have been displaying without dispute, I mean, there are very, very few people that can really argue with the critiques of the market monetary paradigm. There really are. The only ones that do so are the ones locked into this frame of reference, usually assuming that the free market will resolve itself by more actions of the free market, things like that. And I think I've done a pretty good job of continuing the process of exposing that delusion. And as I mentioned earlier, looking through the demand that's coming from a lot of these institutions, you see this echoed, and I'm hoping to have a nice conversation with these really awesome people when they come on with respect to those issues. Now, before they come on, I want to go through some other simple things that are coming up. Excuse me, I have a bit of a cold today, so I apologize. I'm a little rugged. And before I forget, I will probably within 2 weeks, I intend to come down to Occupy Wall Street, and the pamphlets that will be created for the New York chapter, I will post on the website, of course, and they will basically be something to the effect of, "Dear the 99%, what did you expect?" Because we're not the 99%, we're the 100%, and we are assuming that there's this division, and the rhetoric that we see occurring with this idea that the 1% are somehow an anomaly is, in fact, the wrong train of thought. We have been supporting the 1% the entire time, so everyone's to blame. Anyway, this Saturday I'm going to be speaking at a conference called Leaders Causing Leaders. I volunteered to do this a while back. It's kind of in the middle of things, like kind of a little hesitant, a little regretful concerning all the things that are going on otherwise. But I'm going to be doing that. I'm going to be recording it immediately, if not webcasting it. And I'm going to be talking about values and how people are basically locked into specific frames of reference. The limits of debate are firmly set. This will not be explicit to the Zeitgeist Movement, but obviously the rhetoric will be very, very much in line with it. But this will be coming up, so there'll be just more media regarding a very unique subject regarding basically out-of-the-box thinking and stuff like that. So I'll have some media for that, which I think will be educational at the end of the weekend. With respect to the website, we have a big website update coming, and actually I just learned that the blog that has been worked on forever is also materializing in a wonderful way, and we're going to be launching all of this stuff simultaneously. One little thing I want to express about the new site format is that it's a data site, meaning it's an external data flow site. It's not the same type of kind of form we've had recently. The first website we put up was before the chapters. It was before we really had an infrastructure. It was before there was really a set of projects and methods of reaching an audience that we have now through the newsletter, through the press releases, through the radio shows, through, of course, the chapters, the internal chapter projects, the Zeitgeist Day, Media Festival, town halls. All of this stuff has kind of materialized throughout the past 3 years. And what this site will represent is basically those projects in a very active way. And I think it's very important that this type of site is maintained so people want to come back to it. Not necessarily come back to it because of the forum and everything else that we've had. That's actually not going to exist, by the way. We're going to be replacing the forum with a data entry type of situation, along with comments that can support the various articles that will be submitted and written about in conjunction with the blog site, too. So there'll be a merger of the two sites in different ways. So I know some of you will be a little irritated by that we're not going to have the forum there anymore. I believe that people can go to their local forums, their local chapter forums if they want to engage in that, or really go to the Facebook, go to the Facebook world. There's also TZM Network, by the way, which we'll be promoting as well, which is a version of Facebook, which programmers did a very good job of creating a Zeitgeist Movement area for different social networks unified, if you haven't seen that TZM Network. So if you want to pull anything from the forum, now's the time, because it's not going to be there anymore. and we're going to have a completely different system of interaction. So I know some of you aren't going to like that, but I think it's for the better. It enables a certain focus, and it will enable less noise, and it will enable us to pull out important data and submissions, that we can post as opposed to getting lost in the forum, which is something that happens very frequently. Zeitgeist Day 2012, the best suggestion I've had so far is Vancouver, Canada, and I think Vancouver, Canada would be a wonderful place. They do tremendously good work in Canada, and we were considering going to Europe, but it's tricky because of the translation, the language barrier. We're considering having auto translation for the audience in a kind of in a technical medium, but that's tough. So I think Vancouver, Canada is the best prospect we have so far. So that should be pretty cool. Nothing's set in stone yet, but I wanted to throw that out there. Zeitgeist Media Festival. That's right. I haven't had a radio show since that occurred. Zeitgeist Media Festival was such an amazingly positive thing that happened across the world, and a lot of us took big financial hits, but we all took it in stride, and I think for the first event that we were doing this, it really was a tremendous landmark. Lots of food was raised, unbelievable awareness. I made tons of unique connections with other organizations that are doing similar types of projects, and this will grow every year. And as this system continues to deteriorate, people are going to constantly look to find different avenues of expression and avenues of community, really, to figure out where their place is as far as advancement. And there's no better place than the arts when it comes to things like that. And of course, I don't want to go into the explanation of how it relates to Zeitgeist Day. I think we've already done that as the intellectual medium, and then the media festival is more of an arts medium. One thing that did come out of that for me, which is kind of interesting, there's a project out there that has a lot of unique celebrity interest called Project Peace on Earth. You go project-peaceonearth.org. And they approached me to be on the steering committee of this essentially kind of almost mirroring organization event, musical event thing that they're mirroring the media festival in a strange way, but they had preconceived this a while back. And they have a lot. It's very interesting. It's different from what we advocate, but the gesture of it's actually quite beautiful. So it's 11-11-11. They wanted me to perform in Chicago, but I can't do that. There's no way. But anyway, just wanted to throw that out there. Let's see here. What else do we got? Let's see, we've got a few minutes here before Brian Phillips of Occupy Wall Street comes on. Let me see here. Let me see if he's there yet. Nope, not yet. What else has been going on? Yeah, I can't reiterate the site update enough, and it's important, so that's going to be a big one. And we've been working on that really hard for a long time, and I think it's going to be very beneficial to have a place where people can come back to. And when it comes to submission of information, that's really important because I know a lot of people are worried about community interaction. There's going to be plenty of opportunities to submit data. In fact, that's really where the community comes in as far as global. So if you find a news report, which right now it's just robust, different elements, different news reports out there that really need to be brought out, especially with respect to the media blackout of Occupy Wall Street and the asinine reactions of the mainstream media. I'm not sure if anyone saw the CNN reaction where they completely dismissed the entire element of Wall Street as some confused little hippie culture. This is the type of kind of degradation and dehumanizing thing you would expect. But this type of stuff, as an alternative media source, which is kind of what the new site is supposed to emulate, it's very, very critical that it's brought out, and that's where this site will come into play to a certain degree. And let's see here. As far as the day, I know someone was asking, as far as the day when we might descend on Wall Street, again, which would be wonderful to do as a unifying day. I'm thinking late next week. I have to get through the weekend and this lecture and then the rest of the site updates. But late next week, possibly next weekend, this could emerge, which I think would be interesting. I'm looking at the chat here as I wait for Brian to call in. If you guys have any quick questions, now's the time to do it. One thing that I want to reiterate regarding the Occupy Wall Street and will basically occupy the world element that's out there, and when any of us engage this, is we really, really have to focus on the root causes of what's driving these imbalances in society. Until those elements are addressed, there's really nothing that can be done. And I really wish, I kind of wish we had more time. It's interesting because you can't actually predict any of this. Remember early on when people always talk about transition, they say, well, what do we do? How do we do this? Well, this is exactly the kind of transitional attribute that we couldn't quite expect, even though I think we all sort of anticipated this. You know, we in many ways, I believe, our involvement in this transition, if you will be made through change that's initiated by others. That is initiated by others, that's begun, that we begin to interact with. And who knows, we would probably begin to create our own interactions as well in a more civil disobedience way in the future too. But we really can't tell. Who knows where any of this is going to lead? Who knows what type of reaction is going to happen from the state and the news media after a certain period of time has lapsed? Everyone just needs to keep their eyes and their ears open because this is exactly the kind of indeterminacy that we've been talking about for a long time. As far as questions I'm seeing here, actually, hold on a second. Let me see what we got. Okay, it's not him yet. As far as questions that I'm seeing here, as far as uploading PowerPoints, there was a question about uploading PowerPoints. We're going to be doing that. Here's a good one. The orientation video 2011, the orientation PDF, I've been spending an exorbitant amount of time on the side with, amongst everything, working to clarify the most concise and short orientation video and PDF that I possibly can, going in a very, very simple, non-prose way where you're going point by point, here's the problem, here's the solution, and here's what the Zeitgeist Movement intends to be doing about it. Original orientation was very verbose. It was based on a kind of a large spectrum of points that didn't quite have a central focus in many different ways. It was still very valid in its description and what its purpose was, but the Zeitgeist Movement has become more and more focused with its train of thought since the split with the Venus Project. The referent to that institution is now non-existent, which is in fact a good thing because now we go straight to the train of thought. Straight to the train of thought, which invariably the public needs to understand anyway, because if they just reference one individual, one institution, that means they're not actually learning. We have to create education. We have to create people that understand, not create followers and create people that just reference somebody else. That's extremely important. And I'm not saying the Venus Project intended to do that, but I think it's a natural byproduct of the way they chose to operate in this sort of self-referential manner that they often engaged in. The whole of the Zeitgeist Movement is to work to reference the whole of intellectual development from top to bottom. That's really what we need to do. I have been in contact, I would just provide a contact with the president of the Buckminster Fuller Foundation. He saw my interview in Russia Today, my latest interview on Russia Today, and he wanted to speak with me about issues. These guys are really starting to come around that work in these other mediums. And Buckminster Fuller, of course, if you read Critical Path by Buckminster Fuller or Spaceship Earth, you'll find a tremendous overlap with the Venus Project. What I think, a lot of people love to play the credit game. To me, the credit game doesn't exist. It's a group mind. Everyone is interacting at once and thinking at once and being affected by the biosocial pressures that are out there. And just as you had, about two different people inventing calculus at one time back in the day, you can have people come up with the same types of train of thought in a certain environment as well. So I think Jacques Fresco, Buckminster Fuller emerged in the same time period. Whether they borrowed from each other, it's really hard to tell. I'm not quite sure. Fresco is not as prolific as Fuller. If you read Fuller, though, you'll find all the ideas that Fresco talks about and vice versa, though Fuller goes into much more descriptive. He's a much different communicator. That's why Fresco's conciseness is always the easier way to go, because Fuller can be a little bit tricky to read because he kind of invents these words, and you have to get used to his vocabulary. Jacques, and I have to commend him, is really straightforward. That's the beauty of the way he chooses to communicate. But there's a plus and minus to each of them, and I think it's very important that we expand our education. So if anyone out there has never read Buckminster Fuller, I suggest you pick up Critical Path, and you'll see a direct alignment what we've been talking about, and really what is a train of thought. The train of thought is what's really important here. Now, I'm not seeing, let me check my email here in case there's an issue with Brian trying to call in. I know they're in a very chaotic situation. I think they're in a hub in Brooklyn, and I can only imagine them running in circles right now trying to keep tabs on everything that's going on, especially those that are in positions of administration for Occupy Wall Street. But I'll just keep rambling away. If something happens and he doesn't make it, then we'll get Dennis on. But I did hear from him yesterday, and he was excited about coming on. If you guys have any quick questions, please shoot them in the chat right now, because it's a kind of a rare thing that I have the time to do this. Let's see here. The Zeitgeist Movement chapters need to create an educational process below 45. Yes, I agree. The Zeitgeist Movement chapters, well, this all moves out of, again, this train of thought, which is why I apologize that the orientation video, the new one, has been so delayed. I just keep getting hijacked with all of these other projects. But it's coming, and I think it will be very, very clear and concise with many, many, many sources. This isn't just some prose where you're reading something, you have to dissect it for yourself. I'm trying to give a broad sense of sourcing from all the research that's been done by myself over the past 2 years, from the human nature issue to automation to artificial intelligence. There's a lot of stuff out there that congeals together, which promotes our train of thought, whether the people that originate these ideas know it or not, which is even more interesting. All right. Yeah, I don't know where these people are. I hope they're not trying to call in under different numbers. Oh, here we go. All right, Brian, where are you? Here he is. What's your number, Brian? All right, we're going to pick at random. If I pick you at random, is this Brian?
This is Brian. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can. Yeah, I was expecting you to call in from a different number. I'm glad you emailed me. I have this huge queue of numbers that people call in and listen to, so that's why I was looking for that. How you doing, Brian?
I'm doing all right. We're sitting here at the park. We got at least 6,000 to 7,000 people marching with us right now down to Foley Square.
Beautiful.
But, yeah.
Beautiful. How long have you been there? Have you been there from the beginning?
No, I've been here for a week and a half, so I'm short a week.
Okay. I'm curious to know first of all, how you kind of got involved with the organizing party of Occupy. Is this someone that you knew, or people that you knew, or go ahead?
Yeah, I just showed up and I let people, know about my experience and where I'm from and stuff like that, and just with that information, they kind of threw me into the circle.
That's great. And what is your position, if you will? How are they regulating people's labor?
Communications director and head of security. I basically am building the internal infrastructure for the communications of all the occupiers around the country.
Nice.
And I'm also doing security just for the Occupy Wall Street area.
Are you familiar with the Occupy Together website? Are you working
Yes,
with them?
I am. Yes.
That's great. That's great. Yeah, I was really happy to see that. I'm not sure how familiar you are with the work that I've done, but I always kind of reiterate that this is really kind of a global issue. Would you identify with that as well?
Oh, yeah, definitely is.
Yeah.
The great thing about it is, too, is being that it is a global issue, we are already occupying other cities around the world, too.
No, I know. I've been reading about that. I just noticed in some of the rhetoric I saw around Occupy that it seemed to be very American-centric, and I always, that's probably a necessity at this point, because the majority of, Americans really want to think for themselves as far as America, but it's important, I think, to reiterate that this is a global problem with the financial system. So in about 15 minutes, Dennis Traynor Jr. from the October 6th Coalition to Occupy Freedom Plaza is going to join us. Have you met him?
No, I have not.
Okay, because he was down a few days ago and he spent the night in Occupy Wall Street. I was curious if you had a chance. But he's going to come on and talk about the work that he's doing. Are you familiar with the overflow to the coalition to occupy Freedom Plaza in Washington?
Nope.
Okay, so you're not familiar with that at all. It's launching tomorrow.
Are they really?
Yeah, it's a little bit different because you guys are focused on the financial center, but they're broadening and they're extending to basically kind of an anti-war movement. But it's also almost completely in line with the demands that I read about on the Occupy Wall Street site.
Yeah.
By the way, I wanted to ask you about the demands that I had read because I wasn't sure if they were really official.
Oh, nice.
Well, they're not very much official.
They're official or no? I'm sorry.
No, they're not official. I mean, it's kind of a work in progress right now.
Okay. Do you guys have like a team that's together that deals with this type of issue, or how is it being structured?
Yeah.
I'm curious to know.
We actually have a group of lawyers who don't want to be mentioned, but we have a group of lawyers and other political officials that are kind of helping us out with this. I mean, I know we have a bunch of, youngsters, I guess you can say, that are trying to make a stand, but we're making our voice be heard, and with that, we're getting help. Lots and lots of help, actually.
Good. And as far as the media response, you guys getting any more luck with actual mainstream coming down there, or are you still getting...
Oh, yeah, actually, right now we have probably every news station in New York City just on us.
Good. I imagine they're trying to pin you guys in the sense of trying to find ways to dehumanize and dismiss you.
Yep.
Are you, as the communications director, are you engaging them yourself, or do you have a team of sort of press representatives? How are you organizing that?
Right now we're working on getting a team of press representatives, but I am trying to, orchestrate who does actually speak to the media. For the most part, I think we're doing okay. I know we could do a lot better, though, because they do challenge us. I got to tell you, from Washington State, hitchhiking all the way to New York to Washington, from Washington, it's a different culture. A lot of people here actually, they're intelligent.
Right. Yeah. Well, I hope so. That's great. As far as the trend, just so we can get it from the horse's mouth, when this first began, there was only a couple hundred people, if I remember the stats, that were released in the media, but I was never really confirmed on that. How many people do you think you're collecting as a day on average as this continues?
On average now, during the day, we have probably about 3,000 people, and at night we have, I'm thinking, 400 now.
Okay, excellent. And are they, as far as the staying in the tents, has that been basically allowed, or is the police still giving you guys a hard time?
You mean staying in the park?
Well, in the tent, I know there was a lot of restrictions that were coming in there as far as the tents and everything else. I'm just curious about the dynamic.
Tents are not allowed, so we're adapting and overcoming the situation. We're using tarps and other means such as bivy sacks and stuff like that.
Okay, excellent. So, I wanted to talk about this also when Dennis comes on, but, since you're the communications director, the biggest question is really the demands. If you could summarize, for the audience what it is you guys want, go ahead and do so. I'd love to kind of get a general summary of what's happening.
Yeah, I'm going to summarize it. I'm going to make it simple for everyone to understand, and, it's going to be basics. We want the corruption and the, corporate influence in the government to stop. We want the Federal Reserve to be pulled out of the United States because, I don't know if everyone knows this, but it's a private company and it's the main lead cause of our economic fall. So, that's it. We want the corruption. We want the lies and everything just to stop. We want change. We're tired of it.
Sure. Yeah, believe me, I think we all share that frustration. One thing just on the issue of corruption, are you familiar at all with the Zeitgeist Movement's view of the social system and the source of the corruption that we see with respect to how the market system is basically organized?
Yeah, I've been doing a little bit of research on it. Actually, I don't know if you put this out, but there's a video that was just released that was really, really powerful. I don't know if it has anything to do with you guys.
I don't know. There's lots of people that make independent videos. I'm not sure if I've seen it, but I see Dennis in our queue, so I'm going to go to him in 1 second. But in fact, let me go ahead and just bring him on, then we'll bring this into a larger conversation. You guys can meet each other as well, because I think this is a great connection. 1 second. Dennis.
Yes, speaking.
Hey, Dennis. This is Peter. How are you?
I'm well, thanks. How are you?
Doing very well. I hope we can navigate this. You're actually also on the line with Brian Phillips from Occupy Wall Street. I was going to try and do this as kind of a community issue, which I thought would be a good idea. But
that's great.
Brian, I'm going to leave Brian alone for a moment, but stay on the line, Brian, so we can chat with Dennis. So, Dennis, your occupation, if you will, starts tomorrow, correct?
Tomorrow, October 6th, which is the beginning of the second decade of the Afghanistan War, thousands upon thousands of people will descend on Freedom Plaza, and we're not leaving. The broad demand is that we want to bring the troops and the financial resources attached to them home and redirect those resources towards human and environmental needs.
Beautiful.
Now, we've been watching Occupy Wall Street and have found what they have been doing incredibly inspirational. The way they've decentralized and are working on a consensus basis is real democracy in action. I know that they say that they've been inspired by democracy movements in Spain and in Egypt, as have we. And we're just blown away by what they've been able to accomplish simply by Adbusters placing a call out. Well before Adbusters placed that call out, we've had organizations and people building this thing starting on the 6th, going back since May. So we think that basically we're addressing the same things that they're addressing. And we've met some of the people at the Occupy DC event that they've been down here since the 1st, and we think that enough people are engaging in revolt right now that the verb revolt is going to turn into the noun revolution soon enough.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I'm happy to have both of you here, and I couldn't agree more with what you stated, Dennis. And in the gesture of it all, that is exactly the type of movement and change that needs to occur on the sort of surface level. And what I wanted to bring up, first of all, Brian, meet Dennis. Dennis, meet Brian, if you haven't already met, because you guys are on the same.
Hey, Brian, how are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Hey, I got news for you. My father, who's like about 65 years old, he's a union organizer with the Communication Workers of America. He's one of the thousands marching with you guys right now.
Great. Yeah, we got a lot.
Yeah.
Good.
Yeah.
Good. That's fantastic. Well, Dennis, we put out the press release for the movement regarding what you're doing, and the movement has a slightly different position with respect to the root causes of what's happening in the world. And I wanted to kind of pick both of your minds with respect to your view of what this market system and its motivations have actually created. I'm from the disposition, and all the research that I've done is that the flaw of this system that both of you are adamantly and profoundly addressing, the flaw of this system produces a series of consequences, and the consequences seem to rise to the top more than the root cause. And this is our biggest concern in the movement. And basically, the movement itself represents an anti-market type of environment. We believe that the corruption that's being seen both in government, which to my mind is an outsource, if you will, of the economic model, is actually a manifestation of the psychology and structure that's built into this system, which is basically the monetary market model. I don't know if any of you saw my last movie, Zeitgeist Moving Forward, but it does a very large critique on this system itself. And the movement is working to try and counter the system. I just wanted to pick your brains to see if you felt that, if you identify with that, because in our solutions and the way we view solutions, we can't see the corruption stopping on the surface. It has to be stopped at the systemic level. What are your views on that? Let's start with you, Dennis.
Well, I think that I would agree with you that there are no easy solutions to the problems that we face right now. It's not about some kind of constitutional amendment or some constitutional reform or just electing the right woman or man into office. The whole way that society functions is completely out of whack. It's driven by greed. Oliver Stone is probably losing his mind that Gordon Gekko in Wall Street was a satire, and You've got 25 years worth of Gordon Geckos who turned the world upside down. So I think Zeitgeist done a good job in opening people's mind to look much deeper. I myself am not a policy wonk. I'm a kind of a broad stroke guy. I think that greed and capitalism, the way it's structured now, is a homicidal freaking maniac run out of control. We have to stop it somehow.
Yeah. It's too bad we're getting so much noise, I think, from Brian. Hey, Brian, is it possible to go somewhere without so much noise? It's kind of hard to hear.
Yeah, give me 1 second. I'm sorry, guys.
That's okay.
We've had so many people here.
Dennis, I couldn't agree more. The manifestation of what's happened in the system seems to be magnifying the worst that could possibly happen right now. And it's just, every year it seems to get more and more, quote, corrupt. And the greed mechanism seems to be more and more strong. But I guess the solution that sticks in my mind, if you think about it systemically, is how can you maintain that type of balance in people's behavior when the system continually reinforces those elements that basically, generate the greed and say, okay, greed is good, this is what we're doing, we're self-maximizing. This is where the little conundrum comes into my mind, and these are the things that I'm going to talk about when I come down and try to engage some people with Occupy Wall Street, or maybe even come to the coalition that you have at Freedom Plaza. My biggest concern in all of us is if we're going to attack the system, if we're going to do something to try and change it, maybe we should try to get to the closest possible source we possibly can. And this is, of course, open to heavy debate. But, Brian, with respect to everything that we've just said, what is your view on the market system as a root source of many of the problems that we're seeing that might be magnifying the greed and the corruption that you speak of?
No, I completely agree with you guys. And I think the market, it just needs to be stopped in a sense. One of the things that I've noticed just in Occupy Wall Street's little community here is you took the government out of the system and you took control out away from, the people, or not away from the people, but away from the government, and gave the control to the people. And it comes down to the basic instincts of survival. And they actually learn how to survive with each other and are able to, work with each other in that sense. And in our society here at Occupy Wall Street, everyone is willing to work with each other. Everyone is willing to actually, collaborate and invest their skills and efforts into the society that we've created, and it works perfectly. And we don't have this, market where everyone is trying to benefit off of each other or nothing. It's all for the common good cause of just human survival. And really, we just need to completely just take it out, and it'll come down to the point where people are going to naturally survive. That's it, and that's what we need to do.
That's a great perspective, and there's a lot we could expand upon that. The coexistence of human society has to be based on some type of sharing of resources and the application of the knowledge that we all have. And one of the biggest tenets that we talk about is what if, and just as Dennis talked about, what if we took all of our resources that were spent on war and this maintaining of our separation, and we focused on creating the best possible products, the best goods, if we focused on solving problems with those resources, and it even transcends money. It's not even about money anymore. It's about actually using what we know to help and create peaceful coexistence and prosperity. And
exactly.
I just think I think it's wonderful to see all of this converging. And I guess that's the one thing I try my best to leave with anybody I speak with is if we could just get on that plane of a train of thought, and I think both of you definitely there. Going back to you, Dennis, what's the plan with what you guys have coming over the course of the next few days? You're just gonna kind of wing it, or do you guys have a set structure of how you're choosing to maintain the occupation?
We a little bit of both. We have a pretty tight schedule for the next 4 days. Built into the schedule is open assemblies, but we also have we have some speakers and some bands. We have kind of a festival-like atmosphere the first couple of days. We have open mic sessions for performers and musicians and comedians. We've got storytelling tents. We've got training sessions, small breakout sessions. We've got foreclosure and housing rights advocates, environmental activists, people doing breakout sessions. We've broken down on our website, October2011.org, 15 core issues that we feel like that the country and the world needs to face right now, and we'll have breakout sessions around those issues every day, and then from a consensus model that will come out of the assembly, civil resistance actions that happen off of the plaza every day based on what happens there. So we've tried to, as best as we could, create just the structure. There are about 40 people on the steering committee who've been working on this for several months. But what we hope to do is invite people to step into that structure, and just like these people are doing on Occupy Wall Street, is this steering committee that I'm a big part of right now will cease to function, in less than 24 hours, and we're going to turn it over to whoever shows up, in a real direct democracy kind of way.
Wow, great. That sounds dynamic. I know Lee Camp is going to be there too, right? I just saw his blogcast.
Lee is going to be, Lee I think is going to be there. He'll be here tomorrow, but I think he's going to perform for us on Friday. Yeah. And Lee's a friend, so I know that's how you and I came to be introduced. So.
Right, that's great. And as far as the unification of all these movements, what we have is this sprawling out of control of people that are getting excited by this. And we've seen here in Los Angeles, we're getting a permanent occupation group there. And it's obviously spreading in Boston and many other places. Is there any effort happening right now with you, Dennis? I think, Brian, you mentioned that you're working with Occupy Together, the website. But, Dennis, is there any efforts happening for you to unify as well with these other groups that are doing this?
Well, I was actually down at the Occupy D.C. encampment early this morning. I did another interview with another news outlet, and I went to say hello with them. So we're reaching out to them, and we feel like there's going to be a lot of spillover. I'm sure we'll go over there, and I think tomorrow most of them are going to come to us, and vice versa. The one thing as far as expanding or unifying that I feel like we have to be very careful about is now that you're able to get some media attention, you have some mainstream, like even Democratic front groups like MoveOn.org, and Van Jones is trying to. I was interviewed on TV this morning, and they thought I was part of Van Jones' organization, and I said, no. We're not about promoting parties or politicians. They're the problem, and so are these these groups that have their teeth in as front groups for the Democratic Party. That's how we lost free Medicare for all. Is that MoveOn.org came and put the public option on the table. So, as far as expanding with these other groups, I feel like what we're learning from them, and we're being inspired by them, what they're doing on Wall Street, and so that's an expansion, and it's almost 100% overlap, and I think what we stand for. So
sure, yeah. I guess back to points I made earlier with respect to the unification of. With respect to what the real problem seems to be, which is systemic and global, whether it's the corruption of government or whether it's the rampaging greed that seems to be born out of the inherent mechanisms of the market system, it's something, I would hope that something could happen where a council could be created, if you will, with all of these organizations. I'm not referring to MoveOn.org. As far as I'm concerned, they're far too establishment. I'm talking about the grassroots uprising that's occurred, basically kind of the Occupy Together website that I saw, which I wasn't sure how sanctioned that was, and to try and get point people from each occupation to come together in a central place to work out these demands that you guys keep talking about in the most rational and complete way you can, because the biggest thing they're going to use against you in the media is the fact that, they're just so disorganized, they don't know what they want. You guys have already been suffering that so far, haven't you?
Yeah.
So you got, and that's, of course, that's nonsense, because anyone that's been listening to the uprisings across the world understand the common theme that's been developed here, and it's pretty obvious. But that's what I'd love to see in my own personal view. Take it or leave it. Is try to unify all of this, and then to create a set of proposals and demands that will alter this social system for the betterment and well-being of everyone. And that's hopefully the page that can be established. Would you guys agree with that?
I think it's fascinating, Peter. If we have a set of demands that are global, who do you present those demands to?
that's why the grassroots element is so critical, where the table becomes set with completely different people. Eventually, I believe the occupation will lead to civil disobedience on a level that's never before seen, where people will they'll stop engaging the system. I don't believe in violence. I'm sure everyone knows that. What I believe in is the Martin Luther King Gandhi issue, where you just stop supporting the system. And if this thing really takes hold, you have unbelievable power against the establishment, because you won't be supporting the 1% or basically any percent, and they'll have to make a decision on which side they want to be on. And at that point, it's an open slate, and that's really what I love to see. That's the way I sort of envision this ultimate revolution, if you will. So that's why I throw that out there. I mean, that might be something to keep in the back of your mind.
Actually, I definitely agree with that, and I've been working with some lawyers and some other, political officials around that concept, and I guess they're calling it opting out. We opt out. We buy some land, and we start our own colonization in a sense.
Yeah. Well, I just don't think that the political establishment is going to really be there to serve any of us after a certain point, because of what the political establishment is. And it's going to take a very different type of social approach, I believe, to get us on a sustainable path that's actually human conscious, But I won't belabor all of that. But anyway, I think it's really tremendous what you guys are doing. I won't keep you too much longer. If you have anything else you'd like to say, I'll start with you, Brian.
I want to make aware of other websites we are using. We have Occupy.org, and nowtheweather.com. Our livestream.com/Global Revolution, and then we have OccupyTogether.com. One of the things I am working on to connect all of the other occupies is a communication point for everyone to get together, and it looks like we're probably going to start using the new Google Plus Huddle. So just to let Dennis know about that.
Great. Excellent. And Dennis, anything you'd like to add?
I would say that anyone within shouting distance of Washington, D.C., in the next several days, it's a long weekend, come on down, see what we're all about. We stand for a supermajority of Americans, and hopefully, Peter, people around the world stand for. And what we're doing then is only revolutionary because the insane people have taken over. That there's the representative democracy is no longer working at all. So we, the people, are gathering to create a more perfect union. But Peter, to your point, you're right. It goes beyond nationalism or our country. But for us, that's definitely where we're starting. We are gathering to do the job that our representative democracy is not only abdicated, but is doing in a way that's harmful and that's exponentially bringing us closer to the extinction of the species. And I say that without hyperbole. They're driving us towards extinction.
I agree.
October2011.org is where people can find out and get more information. Freedom Plaza is just 2 blocks away from the White House, so people geographically can figure out how to get there. And we hope to see you. We're creating a structure that has organizers but no leaders. And out of that, we hope to have our demands heard. We're not going to equivocate, we're not going to acquiesce, and we're not going home.
Yeah, brilliant. I'm with you guys, and I think a lot of people listening are as well. And we see this as a transition point, and something that if the cards are played right, things could happen actually quite rapidly for change, as long as people remain open and stable, and don't let any agents of provocateur get in there and mess you up, because that's just around the corner. But
yes.
All right, guys, I really appreciate you coming on, and I'm going to be making my rounds at various locations as well, and I'll do my best to continue support and to keep education going. And, just stay strong. I think this is the beginning of something extremely unique.
All right, thank you.
Look forward to seeing
Solidarity, you. Brian, solidarity.
Yeah, solidarity. Thank you,
guys. Take care, guys.
All right, bye.
Bye-bye. All right, so that was Dennis Traynor Jr. and Brian Phillips of Occupy, Coalition Occupy, Freedom Plaza, Washington, D.C., and Occupy Wall Street, which has been going on for the past 3 weeks. A lot of people that, when I first started to talk about this issue or sent out, the support for Occupy, Occupy Coalition, Occupy Freedom Plaza in Washington, D.C. They say, well, this isn't necessarily what the Zeitgeist Movement has talked about. We're not really a protest movement. And this is absolutely true. We're not a protest movement. We've talked about this a great deal. We have to understand that we have to start somewhere, though. And if you really think about the possibility of what's happening right now with Occupy Wall Street and Occupy the World, it's the very seed of the type of transition that the Zeitgeist Movement has been talking about for a long time. It's right there. And it's up to us, if you believe in this, to begin not only raising your objection, as I said earlier, to the establishment, but also to talk to the people. The Zeitgeist Movement needs to kind of absorb, if you will. And the values that we promote, the efficiency that is right there with the resource-based economic model. I mean, the reason I pushed in a little bit with each one of them about what they're demanding and why and what we could do in the market system is, and I think they both more or less understood it, is that until the root cause is addressed, they're just going to keep. They might get some legislation in there that could help things for a little while, but what does it mean after a certain point? Because someone could come in a different administration and completely revert everything that had been demanded. We see this periodically, which is why the train of thought, it begins to transcend politics, it begins to transcend the legal system, and it goes straight to the foundation of what a true economic system is, economics being the management of a household, to take care of all the world's people, to enable prosperity, to do what really intuitively everyone assumes we're doing, but we simply aren't because of the inherent mechanisms of the market system. And the greed is out of control, but the greed is also a product of this system. As I stated in the press release that came out regarding Occupy Wall Street, the mechanisms are all in place for the type of exploitation. Market efficiency demands exploitation. It demands advantage and greed. So in a way, what else do you expect? What else do we expect from these people in power than their, quote, corruption? Because they're not actually corrupt. They're just a magnification of what this system is and what it personifies, what it reinforces. And that is what I really hope everyone out there does understand, and I really hope people can begin to communicate that to everyone else. Until we do so, we're going to be running in circles, I'm afraid. But don't take the high horse with any of these individuals, as I noticed a certain mentality there with certain people as though this is not what we do. Well, we are going to do whatever the hell we can do to get inside of any revolution that can make the change that's required. And it's going to be a long process, but who knows? It might not be as long as we often think. Some people say, it might take generations and generations to make this type of transition to a resource-based economic model. Well, maybe it didn't. Maybe it won't. Maybe it'll take a decade with a very, very tense move, a civil disobedience campaign that shuts this system down, where people say, well, we don't know what else to do, so we're going to have to listen to this grassroots movement. Not the political officials, not the lawyers, not the economists, but listen to people that have never been listened to, basically, in modern history. And that is, as radical as that may seem, I believe that's where the source of this change will come from. This is why the Global Redesign Institute that I want to get going, where people contribute to new social infrastructure design, is what it is. This is why all the communication campaigns are what they are within the Zeitgeist Movement. And for those that still ask the question about the solution, the specifics, and they want to always go back to Jacques Fresco, or even Buckminster Fuller, or even other philosophers of thought, Carl Sagan, Nikola Tesla, with regard to social application, let's remember one thing as far as priority. If we understand the thesis of what sustainability is, if we understand what we're doing and how hideous it is, and the root cause of that, the supplemental design attributes become secondary. It doesn't matter what the dynamics of the circular city are, or any city for that matter. It doesn't matter what technological application and specifics actually are. Those are self-generating once we are mobilized enough to actually want that. So I hope that's extremely clear. Those that have criticisms towards the movement, or whatever they conjure up with respect to solutions, you're missing the point as far as what the foundational reasoning is and the train of thought that really has to be absorbed by just about everybody on this planet. Otherwise, we're going to continue to do the same things that we've done before. So I've got some more time left in this program. If you want, I can take a few more little questions, but I'm not going to. I got a ton to do, and I'm not feeling particularly well. I got to prepare for this lecture again on Saturday, which hopefully will go well. But going to be a little bit different. It's a completely different audience. By the way, if anyone's in Los Angeles and they're aware of the Leader Causing Leaders, do not go. They are charging an exorbitant amount of money for this. I support them. I think they're great. I'm volunteering my time, but I don't want anybody out there to feel like they should pay $200 for a ticket to this really what is kind of an affluent type of event. It's a brilliant idea and it's gesture, but it's not exactly where the Zeitgeist Movement or my participation typically is. So I will be recording this and uploading it, and it'll be freely available, so please don't feel that imposition. So any last questions here? I'm looking at the chat right now. Ding, 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 ding. I don't see any questions yet. I see, Peter, how would you respond to those 7 demands that you mentioned? 7 demands? With 7 demands, there's a bunch of demands. As far as Occupy Wall Street, there were like 13 demands, very, very broad demands. They'd have to be more specific. Please restate the 7 demands that you're referring to. I apologize if I missed something. Peter, what do you think of Brian's idea of buying land and starting the community? We've talked about that in the past. There's nowhere to hide, though. I mean, everyone should have certain fail-safes in the system. I'm working on dual citizenship. I have little spots that I consider an escape to, if you will, but that doesn't mean I'm actually voiding any movement out of this change. That's being in a city center, as I always have, is one of the most turbulent places you can be, and there might be reason to remove myself from the city centers at a certain point, but I don't reflect on that, and I don't necessarily assume that's going to happen per se in any way that would be a threat to me or anybody else that I know. Community centers are not a solution, so just keep that in mind. They can help in the long run, and people need to do whatever they can to protect themselves on a fundamental level, but remember, you're part of a community here, and you'll never escape that community as long as you're on the planet Earth. Let's see, anything else we got here? Will I be attending the Occupations in Occupation LA? Yes, Thomas, I will be. As I mentioned, I'm going to announce a day where I will, along with the New York chapter, come down to Wall Street with pamphlets. As I mentioned, I'm going to create a pamphlet that's titled, Dear the 99%, What Did You Expect? Because as far as I'm concerned, a lot of people are not seeing the causality here. How's the new Zeitgeist movie doing? New Zeitgeist movie is in preliminary outline phase. Everything just keeps coming up, so I really can't do much at this time. But it's going to be very unique, what I've had in store. And it's actually changing in my mind as the world changes. I mean, I am completely going to be adapting this to what's actually happening at the point in time, because this film will take place in the present day as far as its narrative. Hey, Jordette, as far as DayZ, yeah, Jordette had an idea, Jordette's from the Los Angeles chapter, regarding a day where people promote the Zeitgeist Movement through various wares or bumper stickers or T-shirts. And I think that's actually a great idea. The only little caveat to that, Jordette, is it's a little bit market-oriented where people might feel the need to run out and buy something. And that's the kind of little caveat. I don't want people to feel like they have to go buy something from anywhere. If people can make their own shirts and do it independently, I think that's a wonderful idea, and having a day Z, as it were, where everyone's expressing the Zeitgeist Movement on a singular day in their communities. As far as how they do that, I think it's up to them, but I'm a little hesitant to say go buy a shirt and do that, because that's just not the way I want to feel people have a need for that. Sometimes people are far too suggestible, and the last thing we need are people buying lots of things from whatever institution for the sake of something like that, even though the idea is absolutely great. But let me give some more thought to that. Maybe there could be a way people can obtain these resources without actually having to buy them. Let's see here. Yeah, no problem, Jordette. It's a great idea, though. It's that whole buying thing. Where are they going to get the resources? All right, guys. I don't see any questions here. Anybody got any questions? Now's the time. The 7 demands. Well, I apologize. I don't want to read through that right now because I'm on a radio show. Were the Zeitgeist Media Festival audio uploaded? Wait a minute. Next part of Zeitgeist Media Festival audio uploaded? I guess that's not the question. By the way, the Zeitgeist Media Festival will be released in a massive torrent, and it will also have an MP3 download for the entire thing edited for listening. There will be some kind of probably DVD set of merge made available beyond torrent if someone wants to get it to support the media festival for next year. It's an option, but I suggest people just download the torrent and burn it themselves. That's really, people have gotten pretty good at that, and it's easier to not have to house all that stuff for resale and everything else. But that was a beautiful event, and I hope to get some of that stuff up really, really soon. Some previews were put up, but they didn't represent hardly anything. Let's see here. What else we got? I'm missing questions here. Just restate them because the chat's moving rather quickly. Question: what about jobs that can't be automated by machine, such as caring for the old? Thanks, James. That's a unique question. First of all, let's get the myth away that we are going to automate everything and no one has to ever do anything ever again for the rest of their lives ad infinitum. That isn't at all what the automation element is about. First of all, why would anyone want to live that way? People love to do things. People love to create. People love to design. People love to participate. People love to get their hands dirty. This is the human condition. We like to do stuff. And I think the trick here is we need to get people on a plane where they can do relevant things that actually have a reward. Most people, I believe, volunteer their time for things that they enjoy, such as working for the fire department or helping the elderly or donating time to work with poverty or soup kitchens. In our orientation guide, it was denoted, sourced through Jeremy Rifkin, The End of Work, which is another source from another company. That's where I first read about it. And it blew me away that 50% of Americans donate X amount of hours on average per week, and it was an outrageously vast statistic. So they're not being paid to do that. They do it because they enjoy the contribution and the reward they gain from it. And that is the mentality that has to be harnessed with respect to a new economy that's based on automation. People are going to step over each other to want to do things. Not waiting tables, but I believe that people will really want to contribute. They'll feel that urge and that reward, not for monetary gain either. So, why would you not take care of your mother if she's ill and not feel reward from that because you care about her? That can be extended to the community as a whole. I believe that there will be a much more caring society. Even if things cannot be automated, people will step in to take care of their role because they want to, because that's what the society is. We got to get away from this idea that no one will do anything without monetary gain. That is a colossal, twisted distortion. If you want case in point, well, look at me. I've blown outrageous amounts of money. Not blown at all. I'm not operating for monetary gain at all, and I'm on the verge of basically bankruptcy after the media festival. But I enjoy it because I know I'm doing something when I look back upon, I will have respect for myself, as opposed to the bullshit I used to do in Wall Street and advertising that literally I don't even remember. All I have is this blur around like 8 years of my life that vanished. I don't even remember anything. It was just such a loss of time. So I hope that answers your question. People will take care of each other if the system supports it and rewards it. Peter, what about creating a single, short, concise pamphlet that is the same for all chapters that we can give out to those camping out in each city engaging in this protest? Venus Freedom, that's precisely what I want to do. That's precisely my suggestion. I think people will adapt these pamphlets. I actually started to write one earlier today, and that's exactly what my intention is. I want have a downloadable PDF, either editable in InDesign or some other program, and people can update certain segments of it to be relevant to their areas, and that's exactly what we should do. That's why I mentioned the title, Dear the 99%. What did you expect? And if there's anything that will draw a conversation, it will be that one. So when I go down to Wall Street, I'm going to have a banner that basically says that, and I'm going to let people come up to me and yell at me. What else we got here? By the way, if anyone's posting questions and I don't see them, just cut and paste them back in because I won't see them otherwise. Full Zeitgeist Moving Forward interviews, yes. Rubbermuck, amongst the billion other things I have on my list, I do have all of those sitting in files, and I really, really, really want to get them out. I just want to do it in a very clean way. I mean, there's these huge multi-hour interviews. They have to be semi-edited. It's just too much data. There's too much back and forth and different camera corrections. So you can imagine, I think I ended up with with multiple cameras, I ended up with at least 25 hours of footage from just Moving Forward alone. And I even want to release the addendum stuff, finish that with probably the best interview I ever had with Jacques was the addendum interview I did with him the very first time I met him when I went and visited. And that's that's long too. That's probably about 6 hours of footage, of one camera footage. Okay, Peter, what is the movement's your view on animal welfare and carnivore? Does anyone know what Jacques says about this? I assume you're referring to vegetarianism. I think in the course of evolution, humans have taken certain roles. We are omnivores, if I remember that term correctly. I don't eat much meat because of the processing. I don't agree with any larger philosophical disposition. It's hard for me to rationalize it logically, but I do think that in time, through advancements in engineering of different protein structures, if you will, that we will not have to kill animals in the future, and Jacques has actually stated that as well. Jacques said in the future, we can engineer the type of meats, if you will, in a very, very clean way without half of the disease possibilities that we have from current, processing that we have, without half of the horrible treatment of animals, too, where they grow these chickens and they get stuck to the gates. I'm sure you've all seen Food Inc. and all those atrocities. I'm against the production of meat by the system, but I don't necessarily buy the idea that we invariably have to just not kill anything, because it's intrinsically biased. I'm not assuming that anybody here thinks that way, but I grew up with a lot of vegetarians and vegans, and they had a deep moral association to that. And, if you read, like Jacques Loeb, he did all these interesting experiments on seemingly inanimate organisms, and what is our comprehension of other forms of life? We say they don't feel pain. It was actually found that the sensitivity of certain plants was much higher than what we consider to be animals. These are open issues, but I think in the broad view, it's really a matter of humanity. I mean, life kind of feeds on life, but if we can just be humane with this process, then I think it's a natural element of life. But again, in the future, Jacques has stated that we don't necessarily have to kill anything, so keep that in mind. Okay, what do we got here? Dun, dun, dun. Okay, let's see that. Are you taking calls in the phone queue? No, I'm not going to do that right now. It just gets to be too chaotic, and I have no idea who's there. What's Jacques Fresco doing at the moment? Is he spreading his across the globe, I assume, information? I think they continually put out little conferences, little talks. Jacques is always doing something, and it's always great to listen to him. Have I spoken with Russell Simmons? He's talking about organizing hundreds of thousands for Occupy Together on Real Time with Bill Maher. No, I wasn't aware of that. I'm fascinated to see the celebrity interest that has been emerging with this. That was the thing that excited me the most immediately, was to see how fast many celebrities came down, and I think that's brilliant. Let's see. TVP challenge. Peter, do you plan on working with Scott Keller, RBE candidate? The difficulty, I would have to learn more about what Scott's doing. What immediately jumps in my mind with anybody who's running for office is the amount of money that they would require for fundraising. And that's where it gets a little bit spooky, because, if I was to go out and publicly sanction such a thing, then it might create the false illusion that people in the movement should start to donate money, and that's a very, a tricky thing to deal with. We don't support the political system in and of itself. I would have to learn more about what he's doing. I'm certainly not going to degrade it, but anyone using the political system as a soapbox, I think, it's probably a good thing. But I have to shy away from something so blatant as that, at least at this point in time. But I have to also admit my ignorance. I have never met Scott. I've never talked to Scott. So maybe my mind would be changed as far as what kind of support, might be applicable. But I commend him, because I think he is sincere, at least in what he's doing. All right, what do we got here? Peter, what is the one facet of the Zeitgeist Movement we should communicate if asked by mainstream media, for example? Well, I would say that when it comes to the problem, you denote how the structure and psychology of the monetary market paradigm basically is the root cause of most of the world's problems that you see, from the corruption of politics to the complete inefficiency when it comes to the use of our natural resources, the complete inefficiency of the design protocols that create obsolescence, both intrinsic and planned. I would then relate this solution as being one of a very logical respect to the true economic definition, which is the management of the earthly household, which automatically voids all forms of sovereignty and all the tribalistic elements that have been with us due to the fear that we've had for so long and our limited technological evolution. If you can get those two issues across, and the ground-up approach, of course, that comes out of that train of thought I just mentioned, which is detailed in Project Earth, it's very easy to explain the management of resources and the strategic efficiency enabled by scientific ingenuity. There's many details because it branches off like an enormous exponential fractal, but if you can get the fundamentals there, it's almost impossible for anyone to argue that. The only argument that you'll ever get, ever, with respect to what we talk about, is the human nature argument. There's no other argument in existence that can compare to, that can hold up as an argument, if you will, because there's so much ambiguity as to what it is that defines human nature. Now, we've done lots of study on that. It's all in my films, so there's a lot of support. But that's the first thing people bring up, and you'd be amazed, regardless of what you tell them as far as scientific inquiry, how steadfast, they'll hold on to their views of human nature only because all they know is what they see in their environment. And that is, unfortunately, the problem with intuition that people have locked in the box. I don't know if anyone's ever read that book, Flatland. It was talking about two-dimensional land where, a two-dimensional universe. If you haven't read Flatland, punch it up. It's actually a very, very good book. And it's about a flat universe where people in little squares and lines are bouncing along each other, and suddenly somebody from the third dimension comes along, but they don't see the third dimension because all they see is the straight ahead of them. They can't see up or down. They just see forward. So all they see are these weird lines and these strange shadows. And that's really a great analogy to the psychology of people. It's in their intuition. People that throw water on a gas fire, on an oil fire. There's a larger order recognition that simply isn't acknowledged by most people because they've just never had the frame of reference to look at things in that way. And that's why the human nature argument is so persistent against what we do. That's why the communist thing is considered anti-human nature, even though what we talk about, of course, isn't communist. But they use the example of historical precedents in these broad views to say, collaboration doesn't work, which, of course, is absurd. And 99% of human society actually supports a collaborative structure as opposed to competitive. In pockets. It's open for a larger order conversation. Okay, what else we got? See, I'm looking at about 15 minutes left here. Peter, have you watched Century of Self? Yes, Century of Self is a wonderful, wonderful documentary. Everything that I believe Adam Curtis puts out is fantastic. I almost interviewed him, in fact, for Zeitgeist Moving Forward at the early stages of its development. I wanted to just get his view in general. I don't know how broad he goes in his own personal life as far as expressing what he really feels. He's very much a documentary-oriented individual, and sometimes they will discuss things that are for the sake of discussion as opposed to what the individual actually believes. But I really appreciate everything that he's put out, especially the most recent stuff. Okay, I just got a message from Ross C. To what extent are the job losses due to economic outsourcing as opposed to outsourcing to machines? This is not to deny technological unemployment, but rather understand the extent to which each is responsible thinks. Well, as I said on the RT interview, I don't really regard the outsourcing issue because it's like L.A. outsourcing to Sacramento. It's like New York City outsourcing, Manhattan outsourcing to Brooklyn. It's the same area. It's the same land masses. It's the same planet. So outsourcing doesn't mean anything. I don't care about America as far as employment. That's not the problem. The problem is global with the evolution of technology and the failure of the growth system, which is upon us now across the board. So I hope that makes sense. Let's see. I'm jumping random here. Peter, have you considered the problem of real estate in a resource-based economy? Malibu, Hawaii. As far as prime real estate, everybody wants to live on the coast. Everyone wants to live on the edge of a cliff. You know what? That's not actually true. That's not actually true that everyone wants that. And this isn't a utopia, first of all. Let's assume that there are certain elements of a resource-based economy based on our value system now where there is scarcity, which there always will be scarcity. Scarcity always has to persist because that's the planet we live on, and we have to accept scarcity for what it is. So people make the decision. They say, well, I could go and fight for this land. I fight for my little spot so I can overlook that one view that doesn't exist anywhere on the planet, or I can understand the planet we live on, understand the need to share the community, understand the need to share the resources. And probably the best thing to counter that with is the fact that when you don't have a job, when you're in a digitalized culture, which we're almost there now, even with the market system, where you can move around constantly, where property becomes a position of access, where you can gain the things you need across the world, as opposed to loading up these massive moving vans and limiting your flexibility. We don't have to stay in one place because of that labor position, because you're in downtown and you have to go drive back and forth. That will enable people to move around a great deal. So the flexibility of those spaces, I think, will be opened up. I think people will have access to many different forms of real estate, and they'll move around, and therefore that will nullify that idea of having that permanent kind of position, of that elitist view of, here's my mansion on the edge of the cliff. But beyond that, that's a secondary notion. Beyond that, one way or another, people are going to have to realize that they have to share the planet, and systems will be worked out where that can materialize. So remember that the value system of people obsessing about these little cultural nuances is more or less temporal. And it has to be temporal because we exist on a planet that's scarce, one way or another. We have an abundance to provide for all the world's people to a certain degree, but that doesn't mean everyone can have a 50-room mansion and 3 jets parked in their front lawn. That's actually a form of violence. That's a form of violence against the population, to assume that you deserve that much more than somebody else. So I hope that makes sense. Okay, Peter, what is one thing that people do not seem to grasp in these ideas in your experience? Well, that's a big one. Usually again, the human nature argument is the biggest. People just love to assume that we can't operate in certain ways. I think if there's anything that needs to be firmly established and continually explored, it's how society has changed, how our brains have not changed much in thousands and thousands of years, yet our behaviors have changed dramatically. If you can get people to see the flexibility, as Robert Sapolsky said in my interview, he said, the one thing about human nature that's interesting is that we are really not susceptible to our nature. We're not restricted by our nature. And the evolution of human thought is the best example of that. It wasn't that long ago that, people were slaughtering others and ripping their hearts out and showing it to them for sacrifice to random gods. This was just a couple hundred years ago that happened in Mexico. There's anything and everything. You think of it, a society has probably figured out and done it, and it just goes to show the flexibility. It doesn't mean good or bad. I think people are not good or bad because there's no such thing really. People are whatever the system reinforces, whatever is culturally acceptable, and that's really the issue. So I would say that's the biggest issue. Most people can understand the technicals, they just reject it. Below 45, so the entire planet will have the consciousness to know how to act. The people of the world have to learn a common value set if they're expected to get along. The reason that the societies have remained stable for so long amongst different cultures is that usually there's an imposition, a belief system that holds people together. What did Constantine do in Rome when he began to use Christianity to unify all other pagan religions? He realized that this is how you control people. If you have everyone in different pockets of thought, different religions, different belief systems, different socioeconomic views, you're going to lose control. And that's not only from a standpoint of hegemony, that's also from the standpoint of social capital and general cohesion. You have to have a shared value system, one way or another. And the beauty is that we finally got to a point with scientific reference, our scientific ingenuity, is that we can see the bottom line, at least the closest we ever have, with respect to what defines us, how society should operate if we want to live and be healthy and sustainable. And if we can basically admit that to ourselves and have that value system, and everyone begins to identify that in the largest possible mass we can get, then we'll nullify all the conflicts that are out there, and then a new social system will emerge. My biggest objection to a lot of institutions out there, is the fact that they are institutions. They're not creating thinkers. The Zeitgeist Movement needs to create thinkers. It's easier said than done, but that's exactly what we have to do. We don't want to create followers. I don't want anybody to quote me. No one should be quoting Jock. No one should be quoting Buckminster Fuller or quoting Carl Sagan in some blind way. Oh, that's what they said. If you can't pick up the train of thought, if people can't pick up the train of thought and share it and build upon it, then we're lost. And that's why why the Zeitgeist Movement is the communication thing that it is, and why why I think the logic shows that we put the technicals secondary to the train of thought and value system. The technicals will come. The technicals will come once people understand the underpinning of what's possible and how it will benefit human society as a whole and create our sustainability. Okay, what else we got here? What did you expect is not a good way to gain support and interest? Yes, you're absolutely right, but it's provocative. Listen, I have always a jaunty comedic element to the way I operate, and if I have to piss people off to get their attention, I'm happy to do it. This is my personality, though, so no one else has to orchestrate this way. If I walk down to Wall Street and want to draw attention to myself and feel that what I have to say is important, then I'm going to try to find a way to provoke people into gaining conversation with me, even if I'm looked at negatively. I actually enjoy that cynicism. I enjoy being looked at as the suspect one. I've grown to love that, as bizarre as that may sound. Why? Because it enables much more of an effect when people want to challenge you. And I've gotten pretty good at responding to people's challenges. So I'm not trying to put people down. If you read the pamphlet that I'm going to create for New York, or myself at least, it's going to be very, very positive. But we have to get that point across. What did they ever expect from this system? And that pamphlet will denote why that train of thought is what it is, and hopefully awaken those that read it to see that we have a much larger problem at hand. It's not just going to resolve by, demanding living wages, or demanding free education, or demanding we stop wars, or demanding new infrastructure investment. All those are patches, and I think people will eventually realize that. Let's see, Wave Treks Infinity. Peter, any idea how long it will take for this global revolution happening now to actually make a difference, not just entertainment for the 1%? Well, Wave Infinity, this is the ultimate question. I really don't know. If you remember back a year ago, people were saying within the community that, this will never happen. You'll never see the kind of uprising. You'll never see anyone question the monetary system in any real way. You'll never see people question even money itself. I've noticed over the course of the past year an outrageously fast, accelerating reaction to the negative consequences of this system. And I've heard rhetoric come out that I have never heard before. Go back in history and find any protest movement that actually was directly against money, the workings of money, the financial system, infinite growth. You're not going to find it. You're not going to find anyone out there, even in the Great Depression. All it was about broad social systems, if you read through the literature that was documented. No one really went to the core of the issue. No one said, why did the system do this to us exactly? I mean, they did. I take that back. They did. But nowhere anything I've read was there a causality that hit anything other than, say, the Federal Reserve Bank and the general shenanigans that came of it. None of it went to the market system. For instance, if you're going to question the financial system, it's not just the greed issue. It's the fact that the structure is set up to be imposing to benefit the upper 1% holistically. So anyone that wants to object to greed must must also object to the fact that we have an interest system. The interest system rewards the wealthy and condemns the poor. It taxes the poor, if you will, for lack of a better expression, and it continues to feed income to the rich. Now, that's guaranteed structural classism, as I've said before. So do you see that in any literature in Occupy Wall Street or anything else? Is that built in yet? These are the specifics that have to come forward structurally. And once people begin to recognize the structure, the change will happen, I think, a lot faster than any of us expect. I just hope it doesn't get too out of hand too fast where you have to start backtracking because of this sort of disarray and confusion and eventually panic. That's my biggest worry, as I stated early on. There's an element here for panic once the system continues to deteriorate, which is happening very, very rapidly. Once the stock market loses its confidence, which is just a matter of time, like really loses its confidence in the inflationary-driven market and people's retirements start to evaporate, you're going to see a whole new level of dis-ease. Once the unions start to get really, really mad and they start to go on strike and food is no longer delivered to certain grocery stores, you're going to see an entirely new level of disease. So anyway, once the wars begin to accelerate and people begin to question why all these new engagements are happening, if you didn't see people angry enough at what the U.S.'s behavior is, it's going to create another level of disease. Anyway, how much time do I have here? All right, I got a few more minutes. What else we got here, guys? I'm not quite sure what that one means. Peter, in what ways exactly do you see the movement getting involved with the Wall Street protests? Well, I think I've kind of described that throughout the course of this broadcast. We are there to help and show presence, but also to educate those that are protesting, to make sure that the structural issues that we've been talking about for years are addressed and put into the consciousness of these individuals. Otherwise, it's really just the same circle. I mean, as much as I admire those that are doing this and have initiated this, it has the danger of basically doing nothing in a strange way. It has the danger of creating false resolutions that will eventually be overturned in the future. Peter, in what ways exactly do you see the movement getting involved with the October protest rallies across the world? Well, again, same question, same answer. Peter, what do you tell people who think the only solution for change is to fight in more conflict? I say look at the history of conflict and fighting and ask yourselves what it's gotten them. You can't argue with the work of Gandhi and Martin Luther King. The police are there to, well, no. Deep down, the authorities want to see the worst of people. They want to bring out the worst of people because then they can bring out the worst in themselves. And then once violence emerges, then it becomes a self-demoralizing and obviously destructive quality for the expression. So you could say a lot of things about decency and ethics, but I think fighting just doesn't work, if I understand your question correctly. Again, remember, this is only one part of what the movement has been talking about for a long time. It's not only the objection to the system and its root cause, it's also the solution. The solution is critical. The solution plows through it all, which is, again, why this pamphlet I want to create will basically talk about that, too. It will talk about what do you expect, and here's a solution, and hopefully people can see the solution as well. It's going to be hard because most really just want to still complain, but the solution, again, which is the train of thought. I hope everyone understands that. I keep stopping myself because I could go on these long tangents on things that I know I've said a million times. So if you want to be specific in your questions, please do, because sometimes they're a little too general. Peter, how do we best reach those who benefit from the status quo? Well, those who benefit from the status quo are going to be such the minority after a certain point of time that their benefit is going to become nominal. Unless they want to walk around with 1,000 security guards with automatic weapons around them once the system completely collapses, they're not going to have a lot to... The main thing that supported the status quo are the values that people have had, which basically identify with the status quo, assuming that they will be in that position at some point. That's the old fallacy of the American dream. So I think it's really that realization, the realization of the masses to know that the people in privileged positions, quote, in the position of the status quo, are only supported by them. And I think once the support removes, so does those in those privileged positions, hence the status quo. What else we got here? I have 2 minutes left. Actually, I wasn't expecting to go on this long, but I'm happy to answer questions. What do I think about a no-show revolution? Stay home, stop the money flow, default credit cards, cancel contracts, quit jobs. Well, you have to walk a delicate balance with such a civil disobedience type of action. I think it has to be step by step. I already noticed that I believe in. I'm sorry, someone sent me a link earlier to a place where they're protecting Citibank from bank withdrawals. People are slowly beginning to withdraw lots of money. Basically, bank runs will probably be upon us fairly soon, and that's going to be very interesting to see as well. I think I can't really express what type of civil disobedience will emerge yet and why, and I have a feeling it's going to start before the Zeitgeist Movement does anything. I just hope it's correctly targeted. But again, we don't want the system to just shut itself down and everything left out to dry. There has to be a transitional element. So please don't feel so renegade that just to shut everything down. This and that. It's a double-edged sword. As much as I wish it was that easy, the system has to continue on some. If the system doesn't maintain its distribution of food and everything else, it's only going to get worse. So whatever actions are taken need to be extremely symbolic, but yet extremely strategic. This is very important. And I could give a lot of comments about what type of actions like that could emerge. Specific sector boycotts, for example, like the financial system, would be amazing to see. But I'm not going to go on that tangent right now. There's enough chaos happening in the world and enough that has to be kind of organized and understood at this point. Anyway, I'm going to let it go from here. And I appreciate everybody chatting, and I hope everyone got something out of the rather chaotic discussion with Brian and Dennis. And I will be posting more stuff. We'll all be posting more stuff with respect to where we go from here. And a whole bunch of new stuff is going to be hitting the website soon, so everyone keep a look on for that. And 30 seconds left. All right, everybody, I really appreciate it. There's no end music for this, but I hope everyone's well, and I apologize for these questions I'm seeing now that I can't answer. Take care, everybody.